Okay, welcome back everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. Before I kick off our meeting, yes, that pun is intended, I do want to extend a very warm welcome to our newest members of the House of Labour, the Canadian Football League Players Association. My friends, with 3 million workers behind us, the labor movement is strong. And now, with this new offensive line joining us, the labor movement is even stronger. Folks, the countdown to the next election is on. We all hear the sloganeering, the pro-worker lines being road tested. Our ears are ringing with colorful rhetoric as political leaders evoke the real frustrations of workers and try to win our votes. But how do we distinguish between the honest and the hypocritical? How do we actually separate those paying lip service from those prepared to back workers? Well, we have to do that by cutting through the noise and meeting the moment with a smart, strategic, and aggressive campaign. We challenge party leaders and parties to support the very organizations, unions, that support workers. We demand clear platform commitments to get this done. And today, we're going to start with a very simple question, a question that we have the opportunity to put to several political leaders today. Do you support unions growing? For too long, governments have shifted the balance of power to employers. Now we must demand that parties reverse the shift of power from employers to workers. We must demand policies that stop allowing employers to always have the upper hand. We must demand stronger labor laws and measures that bring good balance to workplaces. Make no mistake, if politicians want workers' votes, they have to support workers' voices. And you know, it's no mistake and it's no surprise that politicians are looking to court us. It's because people are behind us. Canadians understand that unions deliver gains for all workers, and we have the research to prove it. New research shows that Canadians support unions overwhelmingly. Over 3 in 5 believe that it would be a good thing if more people belong to a union. I certainly believe that. Don't we all believe that in this room? A whopping 70% believe governments should remove barriers to joining a union or forming a union. People want a crackdown on employer intimidation and misinformation, and they want to remove hurdles placed in workers' way. For years, we have faced governments weakening labor laws, making it harder to organize, and we've seen that it means a widening wealth gap in this country. Those at the top are doing better and better, while those workers and their families and communities continue to struggle and fall further and further behind. You know, we saw it even in the middle of a global pandemic. We saw Conservative governments pass wage restraint laws to hold essential workers at bay from getting decent wage increases. That is shameful. Conservatives in Alberta went even further. They launched an all-out assault on worker rights. They tilted things radically in favor of employers. They took away basic protections like the right to refuse to do unsafe work. They stripped away automatic card check rules, making it harder to join a union and easier for employers to obstruct workers from organizing. Now let's think for a moment, what did Mr. Poilievre say about these union-busting acts? Do you know? Does anybody know what he had to say about those anti-worker laws? Yeah, his silence was deafening on all of those points. You know, Mr. Poilievre, he talks so much about gatekeepers, and yet he failed to stand up to union-busting gatekeepers like Danielle Smith. But we all know why. It's because for him to disagree with anti-worker premiers, he would have to disavow his entire record as a politician. So let's take a moment to just remind ourselves of what his record actually is. You know, for the last 20 years, he has targeted the RAND formula. He has repeatedly attacked union advocates. He has voted for back-to-work laws and imposed low-wage settlements on workers. And indeed, even before Alberta got creative with Bill C-32, the last time that we saw such brazen union-busting laws in Canada was during the last federal election, during the last federal Conservative government. They passed laws that attacked a union's ability to even operate and properly represent their members. And who was leading those anti-union efforts?
Pierre Poilievre.
Absolutely, it was Mr. Pierre Poilievre, proudly boasting about how he wanted to bring union-free workplaces to Canada. Whatever he claims today, Mr. Poilievre has a consistent 20-year record as an anti-worker politician. And I ask you, have you ever, anywhere in Canada, see him walk a picket line?
Never.
Has he ever voted to strengthen workers' voices?
Nope.
Has he ever raised his voice against union-busting gatekeepers?
Nope.
But you know, Mr. Poilievre sure is fighting hard to get power for himself. But he has never fought hard for worker power.
Shame.
You know, the truth is that whatever Mr. Poilievre tries to claim, Conservative goals align with corporate interests and not with working families. Conservatives want austerity and radical spending cuts. Conservatives will never make price-gouging companies pay their fair share. Conservatives oppose things like investing in childcare, in public health care, and pharmacare. And time again, they do the bidding of Bay Street CEOs and corporate lobbyists when Conservatives put obstacles in the way of union organizing. My friends, we must be under no illusions. Workers are having a hard time making ends meet. They are being shortchanged by rich bosses, and they're getting ripped off by grocery store CEOs and gas companies. And they want change. And that's exactly what we are going to fight for. Change that gives workers better pay and more respect in their workplace. Change for the good of all workers. But that is not the kind of change that Mr. Poilievre offers. A federal Conservative government led by an ideologue like Pierre Poilievre will create a country where workers and Canadians feel less safe and have fewer protections, where workers will share less of the wealth, and where workers' rights are undermined, and employers will always have the upper hand. We must not let this happen. We must do everything in our power to expose Mr. Pierre Poilievre for the fraud that he is.
Yes.
So what do? Well, we remember how we elected enough worker-friendly MPs to repeal the toxic Conservative laws that were passed under the Stephen Harper Conservative government. And we remember how we pushed this minority parliament to come together to deliver critical progress for workers on childcare, on dental care, doubling GST rebates, and helping deliver for renters. And now, after literally decades of fighting for anti-scab legislation, passing anti-scab legislation, and pharmacare in Canada. It was your hard work around this table and in this room, and the hard work of thousands of activists across this country. That's how workers got these things done. Just like we did in my home province of Manitoba. Workers came together and organized, and Labour worked together to defeat the Conservatives and elect Wab Kinew as a premier of a Labour-friendly majority NDP government. And we know in this room that that was hard work, right, Kevin? That was hard work. But that's how workers get things done. And we are not done yet. We know that millions of workers are counting on us. We must use our power to get all parties to call for the creation of a federal task force on worker organizing and empowerment. A task force that will bring back concrete recommendations to remove barriers to first collective agreements, to require employers to provide timely information, and to end employee misclassification. And we have to crack down on companies unfairly obstructing workers from organizing. All parties have to agree to join us in fighting for automatic card check certification and for anti-scab laws in every province and territory across this country. And we must hold any party and leader to account if they fail this basic test. My friends, in every single election, we also face our own test. Either we come together as worker representatives and as the labor movement with a common front, or we get swept aside. Either we rise to the challenge or every worker in Canada suffers. Either we act now and confront politicians trying to take us backwards, or our hard-fought-for gains will become nil. I believe in workers. I believe that we are strong enough to move governments. And I believe that together we can make sure that more workers have the rights, respect, and dignity that come with having a union card in your wallet. Because let's face it, if there's one thing that all of us have learned from one another and from so many labor activists across this country, it's the awesome collective power of workers to improve their workplaces, their communities, and our country. So together we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get the job done, because nothing, absolutely nothing, beats the power of worker solidarity. So now let's kick some ass for the working class. So we're happy to take any questions folks might have before we return to the remainder of our very packed agenda for the next 2 days. And if you have no questions for us at this moment, we will be around to take your questions as well, if you think of awesome questions after the
Stephanie and
fact.
Raisa, if you want to ask questions, this is the scrum time. I think we're not scrumming.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll give the media a few minutes to depart.
Stephanie, did you want to come for a scrum?
We're the labor movement. We like to do things a little differently. No problem.
Hi, this is Taylor, the Canadian Press. Thanks for inviting us this morning. Is Mr. Poilievre a threat to you? You spent a lot of your time dedicating your speech to talking about him, and yet he's not in this room. So is he a real threat to you guys?
So Mr. Poilievre is not in this room, and we are very focused on what workers are telling us they need across this country. They need to address their issues of affordability, housing, respect and dignity in the workplace, workplace safety and health. He's not in this room because he doesn't address those issues in a meaningful way. And so while he may not be an imminent threat to us, we are very serious about making sure that we call out politicians for their track record on worker issues.
Why not invite him? Have you tried to get a meeting with him? Have you tried to kind of sit down and talk about his record or some of the comments he is making on workers? Because since becoming leader, he has not called for things like back to work legislation, and sometimes once you're in a leader's office, your record in Parliament from many decades ago doesn't necessarily always come with you. So have you tried to make any inroads with him or kind of invite him to this event?
So we have not invited Mr. Poilievre to this event, and that's because, quite frankly, we're focused on worker issues. And when we look at his track record, 20-year track record of consistently voting against rights and benefits and decent wage increases for workers, he has a consistent record. Not only does he have a consistent past record, just this past week on Monday, the Sustainable Jobs Act was passed. Mr. Poilievre and his caucus voted against that. The Sustainable Jobs Act is an incredibly important piece of legislation, giving workers a voice in how we transition to a net zero economy, making sure that we actually can continue to have good paying, family supporting and community supporting union jobs. And yet his caucus and he voted against giving workers a voice at that important table. And so he's not only dealt a blow to workers in the past, he's dealing a blow to future workers as well.
Raisa Patel, the Toronto Star. I take the points that you just made, but at the same time, Mr. Poilievre is a very popular leader. I'm wondering if it is in your best interest to try and make inroads with him.
We want to make inroads with politicians that consistently will stand up for workers and that will consistently engage with us and listen to the issues that we bring to the table. That has not been our experience at the other end, and so we're going to continue to focus on the issues that workers remind us that they are dealing with every single day within their workplace, within their communities, and we're going to continue to champion those with politicians that have an interest in actually championing those points as well.
The NDP and the Liberals will have a presence here today. I'm wondering, are you trying to signal to workers that the Labour vote has a home with both the Liberals and the NDP?
I think the reality is when we've seen this past number of months and the past couple of years of the opportunities to make real gains on worker issues that I outlined in my speech on pharmacare, on sustainable jobs, on things like making sure we have investments in childcare, making sure we have investments in healthcare. Those are the two parties that have been working towards that, and that's who we want to continue to engage with, to continue to push for more.
Last question.
This is a room of Labour leaders, but why do you think workers, members of the working class, are looking to Mr. Poilievre in droves and numbers that we have not seen for the Conservatives? And maybe what does that say about the direction union leaders and union leadership is taking? Because it seems, if you look at public opinion polling, it seems that there's a little bit of a disconnect. So why do you think workers and the working class is looking to Mr. Poilievre, despite his record, as you were talking about?
So union leaders engage with their members every single day, all across this country, in all sectors and in all regions. And we well understand the frustration that's out there. We well understand the frustration and the fear about the future of their jobs and the fear about being able to make ends meet. Politicians who offer simplistic answers without actually providing a real strategy on how they're going to achieve what workers need are not politicians that we can count on. And so it's important to us to continue to engage with politicians that will hear us, that will actually work to solve these issues with us, and for us to be able to speak with our members about what it is that we actually need in order to fix the problems that we're facing currently in Canada.
Thanks so much.
We are going to take a short pause to refill your coffee cups, and we will be back in a few minutes.